Well, hey everyone, it's Terry back with another edition of the Sober Edge podcast. And I am really excited today to share with you my 100th episode of the Sober Edge podcast. If you are new, thank you for tuning in. And if you have been with me since the beginning, thank you for helping me create something that I hope is special and helpful and that I have enjoyed so much. So, in the show notes, I have some stats about what these 100 episodes have looked like, how many guests I've had, how many double time guests, and all the cool stuff that's kind of fun. But today, what I did was I put together a bit of a montage around some of the guests that have really connected with you as the audience and have been really special. And so today I'm going to share 5 clips from 5 different guests. And we're going to start with Amanda E. White. So, Amanda E. White is a therapist, and she is also an alcohol free individual who weaves a lot of her therapy and her information for women around boundaries and giving themselves permission and eating disorders and alcohol free living into a beautiful offering. And she has been busy since we met in October of 2021. So, yes, she was one of my very first guests. So, Amanda had a book that was coming out at that time called Not Drinking Tonight. She has since published a workbook as a companion to Not Drinking Tonight as a clinician's guide for helping women stop drinking or take a break. And she recently had a baby. So I wanted to share her, take on this journey of alcohol-free living. And again, this was from a couple of years ago. So if you haven't listened to the whole episode, you can circle back and the show notes will have the episode number. I hope you enjoy this. And mental health and the connection with drinking. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So just in terms of, right, like alcohol as a substance, I think we forget that it is not something that we're designed to drink. Our body doesn't love it, right? As like Holly Whitaker has said, it is essentially like the same thing as rocket fuel. So I think like it's really important to just understand on a biological level. And I talk about this a lot in my book about evolution and the history of drinking and all of that stuff. But in terms of mental health, I mean, one of the biggest things that people don't realize is alcohol makes your anxiety way, way worse. And so many of us, I think, especially this year, are struggling with anxiety and depression. And it's tricky because initially when you drink, you do feel numb. So your anxiety does feel like it goes away. But alcohol is a depressant. So your body produces anxiety producing hormones like cortisol to come back to homeostasis. This happens even after alcohol leaves your body, even if you've only had one drink. And that's where the phenomenon of feeling more anxious after you drink really comes in. So I think that is, one of the biggest ones that people only seem to talk about alcohol use in terms of addiction. And they don't understand that having one drink also impacts your mental health. I think that there isn't even probably as much research on kind of like what 1 drink, 2 drinks, 3 drinks really does to us and our mental health, because I think doctors, therapists, like medical professionals are so focused often on addiction and substance misuse. And they spend a lot of time trying to quantify what is normal and what is not normal I think that just like anxiety and people have just started talking about that more. And I know like Annie Grace did some amazing work just like, because that conversation didn't exist when her book came out, but actually talking about what even just one drink does to you. So yeah, I think a lot of people don't necessarily know the term anxiety. They might think that it's just part of being hungover, or they don't totally make the connection because, right, anxiety can also be not in your face. It could be just like, accelerated heart rate, unable, like tightness in your chest, irritability, like overwhelm, all of these little subtle things that I think sometimes people also just think this is just this is my baseline state. And they have no idea that maybe, oh, wait, maybe there is a connection with drinking and that, or worrying about what you said and that. Like, I think we don't even think about whether it's like, I know when I stopped drinking, I was like, there are people who don't, wake up the next day and like comb through their phone and wonder what they said and worry about what they did, and what a relief like that was. Because to your point, we normalize it. When I was in college, we used to laugh about, all the things that we did the next day. And we never paused and said, like, this is kind of odd, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad you shared that. Yeah. Thank you for that personal touch on that. It's so, so important. And I think one of the things that floored me, I was doing a presentation. So I was doing a little research, and I think it's the Center for Disease Control, says, normal drinking for women, 1 drink a night. So 7 drinks, but excessive drinking is 8. And I was like, wait a minute. Shouldn't it be like normal drinking is 2 and excessive drinking is 8? Like, what happened there? They went right from this is normal, this is fine. 1 more drink, you're way over the line. And I thought, okay, this system needs a little tweaking, because that doesn't make sense. And I think it just speaks to how we don't really have a conversation about what 1 drink does, what 2 drinks does, and yes, Annie has absolutely done some work around that. And one of the things when you were talking, we have that dynorphin is one of those chemicals along with cortisol that, and the thing about dynorphin is it stays in our system for longer. There's no mechanism that helps us deplete the dynorphin on a timeline. So you can stay with that heightened anxiety for a long time. And so I love that you are addressing, anxiety can be a huge part of the connection with drinking, that we want to talk about that. And we want people to understand that piece, because we can do better, as wellness professionals, health professionals, we can really help people understand that connection. So I interviewed Dr. Annie Savage in early 2023, and it was an episode that got a lot of traction with all of you, because this idea of alcohol, women's health, menopause, and really checking in with our bodies after we stop drinking is an important conversation. So again, if you missed the original episode, please go back and listen. I'll have the episode number in the show notes. And let's catch up with Annie's recommendations when it comes to alcohol-free living.
Whether, no matter which, decade you're coming in, if you're already in 50s, 60s and you're just like, menopause is killing me, or if you're in that mid 40s where you're like, I don't know what's happening, but something is. And then, our 30s, we've got fertility, infertility, the PCOS, the pain stuff that we deal with. And I love the young women who come in mid 20s who are just like, this isn't right. I need help now. And I'm like, you're going to go far. That's where you're so driven to take care of yourself. And I love that. And I feel like the women that I know in their 50s, their 60s have really been done a disservice, because, you're on that brink where you probably had to see male doctors for most of your life before female doctors were even more well known in the picture. So it seems like the women that I come across, meet, interact with in this story are so often just told, oh yeah, that's normal. That's just menopause. Like, that's just what it is. Here's an antidepressant, that kind of thing. And that's such a disservice to you, of course, because then you're stuck dealing with it. And if your mom had a similar picture, that's how we've gotten this story of like, well, my mom's menopause was like this, so mine is, and that's life. And that doesn't need to be the case. So I'd love to interject any of those stories in any of those decades, because women are sitting there thinking their body's supposed to be hurting, things are supposed to be falling apart, and it's really not like that.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. And what a gift to give that to women, that, this is not how it's supposed to be. I mean, in my nutrition practice, and mostly I am a sober coach at this point, I don't do a ton of nutrition, but I always talk to people about Like they'll come to me and they'll say, oh, I'm just aging, or that's just the way I feel. And it's like, and is that good enough? Because
Totally.
we really want to focus on, what is happening, where can we thrive versus survive. And it's fascinating when I work with women in their 40s, usually mid to late 40s are the ones that I find are struggling the most. And when we add in this alcohol piece, here they are in pain, stressed out, challenged with kids going through the tweens, maybe teens, and then they're using alcohol as a way to either self-medicate or cope, or for all the reasons we use alcohol. And then we've got this really incredible picture of lifestyle impacting, this hormone journey and just not getting the right information. So I just think it's so powerful to explore how lifestyle and things like alcohol can affect our hormones and what we should be doing differently and what we should be doing better. And so, what's going on with alcohol? Like, we're not often using alcohol just because it's fun. By the time people come to see me as a sober coach, they're, overusing alcohol, and they're using alcohol for a lot of things that aren't serving them. And so it's really powerful to say, like, what's the why?
Totally. And I think well, you could say this because you're the sober coach, but how many of those people, when you say, what's the why are you using alcohol? They don't really notice that they're using it in that way. It really becomes a habit. And alcohol is a tough one because society, shows, marketing, everything around us tells us to drink. It tells us it's a fun thing to do, it's a social thing to do. What bothers me, it makes me angry actually, is the classic sort of woman, either working woman or housewife, either way that they're depicted, but on a television show. And the woman is like, oh, I just need a glass of wine. Oh, my hard day, I need a glass of wine. And it annoys me because women aren't doing that. That shouldn't be our story. But B, it's just giving that option because obviously if you're sitting and watching a show and that's what you see at every turn, every time you change the channel, you're thinking, oh, yeah, it's a great idea. I should have a glass of wine. If you are lucky enough to be stopping alcohol, stopping whatever piece it is that you've been doing to yourself, knowingly or unknowingly, you can make such huge changes. And in a relatively short amount of time. Like you said, you drank until age 55. So from whatever age you started till then is quite a while. You've had a much shorter time in your life, probably without alcohol, but you would probably say that there's, tenfold amount of positive changes that you see versus the nice taste of wine.
Yes. Yeah, that's great. And thank you for that gift. That's such a wonderful answer. Thank you for sharing that. It really is powerful because people do need to know that it's not a death sentence to say, I drank for 30 years. Like there's no why stop? No, your body is begging for you to stop. Stop putting the toxin in, start, getting some positive input in the form of nutrient dense whole foods and all of those good things. And then the changes will come because the body really is miraculous. I always tell people, our body is this complex, mysterious chemistry lab and everything affects everything. And so just by removing alcohol, we have so much possibility to heal and to, become these vibrant beings, no matter what our age. A very popular episode aired in April of 2023 when I was privileged to interview Buck Robinson, Iron Man. Yes, I have an update because when Buck and I had this original conversation, he was training for the Lake Placid Ironman. And we talked about his passion for fitness and running and how it got sidetracked while he was drinking. And so this was a super popular episode. Buck has a huge, just sort of swell of followers and enthusiasts who are so inspired by his story. And I think you will be as well. So Buck recently shared with me that he completed the Lake Placid Ironman in his record time of under 14 hours, which was 13 hours and 53 minutes. And wow, what a huge accomplishment. So it was so great to catch up with Buck. He also shared he's going to be on a upcoming episode of the Annie Grace podcast, This Naked Mind. So you can also catch up with him there. And I hope you will be as inspired to hear this recap as we were, all of us, when we listened to the original episode. And you shared that you will be running your first Ironman in 15 years after taking a long break. You're doing that again in a couple of months?
I am. I think there might be a little rust on this Ironman, but I'm definitely getting back into it, and actually, ironically, I'm doing so as a function of being a sponsored athlete by Athletic Brewing, which I'm sure we'll touch on at some point. But it's all part and parcel to this whole getting back and really living my fullest life now that I'm no longer shackled by alcohol.
Yeah, that's so powerful. This podcast was really born around the intention of inspiring people about what is possible on the other side of drinking. We have so many misconceptions and preconceived ideas of how terrible it's going to be when we stop and all of the things we're going to lose. And what we realize as we move forward on this journey is that we are gaining a lot of things. And for you, kind of returning to that former athlete and kind of picking back up that part of your life has been a big part of this, journey for you becoming alcohol free. Is that fair to say?
Oh, very fair. And really, it's like a muscle you haven't used in a very long time. It's there. It's maybe a little weak, but it once you give it some love and show it some attention, it starts to come back, stronger than ever. And it wasn't like at some point, something was stressing me out and I'm like, I have to go for a 20-mile run just to deal with it. Right. Like, I mean, it wasn't that, but with alcohol, it was like, yes, I had a really bad day. I really need to take the edge off or calm down. But then it became anything that could set it off. And alcohol became the solution to problems that I was actually creating just so that I could have that reward. Right. And I think it's so weird to talk about alcohol as a reward because it's really a punishment. Right. It really is. Your mind is telling you, oh, this is what we wanted, but this is really a form of punishment. So to have now removed that negative form of coping with something that really does provide a natural source of endorphins, really does help my cardiovascular system, all these other things that have this ripple effect of positivity has just been a blessing. I as far as I'm concerned, and we'll touch on this, but it's quite literally a second chance at life for me.
Well, I am delighted to share a recap and some of the highlights from the episode with Chris Engen that aired about a year and a half ago as part of the podcast. And I was so excited to speak with Chris because she is an amino acid therapist. And one of the things that I have learned and recognized as a coach helping others with this alcohol-free journey is that we need lots of tools. And Chris has some amazing insight, specialized training, and tools to help those of us that need a little extra when it comes to changing our relationship with alcohol. So in this recap, I've tried to highlight some of the special ways that Chris uses targeted amino acid therapy to help those of us that are still having cravings around alcohol. So this is a really important episode. It was quite a popular episode, and it's one I'm very proud of because I feel like it's really powerful to connect those of you that are still struggling with alcohol to as many resources and tools as I can. So I am ever grateful for Chris and the work that she does in the world, and I hope you enjoy this recap.
said, we're using so much willpower because addiction isn't about willpower. And I think that's something that people get confused on is, oh my gosh, I have willpower in all of these other areas of my life. I'm a high achiever, straight A's, top of my business game, and I cannot I cannot quit drinking. And that is a very common thing I hear from people. And the answer is it's not about willpower. So I'll get to that later.
Exactly. Yeah.
So amino acid therapy is the use of targeted amino acids, which are supplements that you can find at any vitamin store. You can find them at Whole Foods. I also have an online dispensary. I suggest pharmaceutical grade. Absolutely. They're fairly inexpensive. And again, they're individual amino acids that are used in conjunction with a symptom chart that helps identify where you're depleted in the 4 major neurotransmitter systems, which are serotonin, GABA, the endorphins, and the catecholamines. So within each of those groupings, there are symptoms. I can use an example. Low catecholamines, which would be dopamine, adrenaline, noradrenaline. Deficiencies there are when a person is slow to start. It's like the apathetic type depression, can't focus, very scattered. For those symptoms, there are 2 different amino acids specifically that are suggested. There's a biofeedback way of trialing these amino acids so that your body tells you how it's responding, and then a way to monitor as your neurotransmitter systems get built up again, you become level and not needing to grab alcohol or whatever other drug of choice you're using to self-medicate those symptoms. Amino acids are the building blocks of protein, and protein makes neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are the chemical messengers in our brain. They're responsible for mood, for being able to cope with stress, being able to stay in homeostasis, basically. So when those get depleted, alcohol use is certainly something that depletes neurotransmitter levels. They then can cause those symptoms. So if somebody's a stress eater or a stress drinker, they're drinking to calm down, likely they're deficient in GABA. And so by using GABA, which is a specific amino acid, you can eliminate that stress that caused the craving, and therefore you're drinking alcohol to not be stressed.
Wow, this is fascinating because this is the part that really is, I coach in these big groups, I coach individuals, and we focus so much on, yes, bringing in the lifestyle support. But I think what's fascinating about this is, just like when I talked with Chris Scott, there is a faster way, and there is actually a way that your body has been searching for to balance. And so I think that is what's so interesting about this and so exciting, that we have the opportunity to now take a look at where we're depleted. And I think what you're talking about, a lot of this is we kind of say this in this Naked Mind, and I don't even know how accurate it is, but thinking about, drinking is a symptom. What you're sharing is this idea that there's something behind the need to reach for alcohol. We're looking for something in alcohol that is actually something that's already depleted in our system.
That is exactly right. And that was one of my, just going through the chart and the schooling, learning about this to become an advanced amino acid therapist, that alcohol is the drug that crosses all of the neurotransmitter systems. And so to explain that, it's fascinating. Actually, alcohol, tobacco, and sugar, which are the 3 free, I'm not free, but the 3 that are the most widely available, because people use alcohol for some people to calm down, some people for that stimulus. I was the person you're talking about to do the laundry. Oh my God, the mundane. I can't even possibly clean this house if I don't drink, because I'm going to die of boredom. So I'm going to, so I'm going to drink so I can get some energy to do this. The stress drinkers would potentially be low GABA. What the drinkers that want the stimulus, the focus, the energy, that's low catecholamines. Low serotonin drinkers are drinking to turn off their brain because they're worrying too much. They're perfectionists, low self-esteem. Maybe they're drinking to go to sleep. It's a different kind of depression. It's like an under a dark cloud depression versus a slow, sluggish, apathetic depression. The serotonin's the under a dark cloud, and the low catecholamines is like I can't get started procrastinating type. And then the last one is the low endorphins, and that's that drinking to escape and numb out. And I also used to do that, where you don't want to be here. I can't deal with this. I just want to go somewhere else. So that's a symptom of low endorphins. And there's an amino acid for each of those areas that I just discussed that will help eliminate that symptom. So therefore, if the symptom's gone, then the craving's gone, because you're not reaching for your drug of choice, in this case, alcohol, to make yourself feel better.
And finally, I wanted to highlight some of the conversation that I had with Susie Streelman from Zero Proof Experiences. Again, this is an episode that helps us understand and to really recognize and explore the idea of socializing without alcohol. We get so caught up in the what ifs or it's not possible that happens in our brain that I just enjoyed this conversation with Susie so much because she paints a picture of getting out of our comfort zone in a way that is totally fun and unique and exciting. So, Susie and I now have a bit of a history together because since I interviewed her for the podcast, I was able to go to Sober in the City Zero Proof Experience in Palm Springs. And that was in February of 2023. And in just a couple of weeks, I will be traveling to Portland, Maine, and be one of the speakers on the panel for thought leaders at the Sober in the City event in Portland, Maine. So I am so grateful to Susie for putting all of this together and allowing men and women to come from across the globe to connect in a way that is just very unique and fun and delightful. And I like to think of it as a wonderful girls' weekend where we do everything but the drinking. So there's so much fun planned for this main event. And if you haven't gotten tickets yet and you're still interested, I will link that in the show notes as well. But Susie, I didn't realize this was the first podcast she had been interviewed on. So it was so much fun to have this conversation. And she really, again, paints this picture of what is possible when we step up and listen to that inner voice saying, you might have a gift to share with the world. So I hope you will be as inspired as I was when I had this conversation with Susie, and maybe take advantage of some of these Sober in the City events and Zero Proof experiences in the future. 2024, new things are coming up, and I will link that in the show notes as well. And finally, I wanted to highlight some of the conversation that I had with Susie Streelman from Zero Proof Experiences. Again, this is an episode that helps us understand and to really recognize and explore the idea of socializing without alcohol. We get so caught up in the what ifs or it's not possible that happens in our brain that I just enjoyed this conversation with Susie so much because she paints a picture of getting out of our comfort zone in a way that is totally fun and unique and exciting. So Susie and I now have a bit of a history together because since I interviewed her for the podcast, I was able to go to Sober in the City Zero Proof Experience in Palm Springs. And that was in February of 2023. And in just a couple of weeks, I will be traveling to Portland, Maine, and be one of the speakers on the panel for thought leaders at the Sober in the City event in Portland, Maine. So I am so grateful to Susie for putting all of this together and allowing men and women to come from across the globe to connect in a way that is just very unique and fun and delightful. And I like to think of it as a wonderful girls' weekend where we do everything but the drinking. So there's so much fun planned for this main event. And if you haven't gotten tickets yet and you're still interested, I will link that in the show notes as well. But Susie, I didn't realize this was the first podcast she had been interviewed on. So it was so much fun to have this conversation. And she really, again, paints this picture of what is possible when we step up and listen to that inner voice saying, you might have a gift to share with the world. So I hope you will be as inspired as I was when I had this conversation with Susie, and maybe take advantage of some of these Sober in the City events and zero proof experiences in the future. 2024, new things are coming up, and I will link that in the show notes as well.
Never in 100 years did I think I'd be saying, look, over here, super good time, alcohol free, over here. I mean, there's many days that I still wake up and go, what are you doing over here? In fact, there was a lot of years, maybe like some of you, that I believed my life would simply be incomplete without alcohol in it. It wouldn't be rich. It wouldn't be fulfilled. There would be so many things that I was missing out on. So when I had a break of around 6 months, let's say, started to really bother me, frankly.
Oh.
One of my favorite things, I'm a social person. I love my family. I love friends. I like to go out and do fun things. One of my favorite things is to go out to dinner and really just enjoy that nice experience. So around 6 months, I think one of the kind of the big things I did was go for like a ski weekend. And, the gals were very supportive. We had a great time. I got some of the worst drinks, honestly. So sometimes like I did get a nice mocktail. They brought it to me in this huge water glass. My friends were drinking these sexy cocktails and pretty glasses. And I came home thinking these restaurants need so much education. I started an Instagram account a little over a year ago and just started talking about maybe we have a travel excursion. Maybe we plan like a multi-course dinner. Maybe we just actually finally somebody commented on my Instagram, and this sort of did get me going. Like she said, I've been talking about this and promoting this for the last 4 or 5 years. Would you just go ahead and do it already?
And so the opportunity to get together and to experience this freedom of socializing in this way is, I think that was one of the things that really struck me. There was so much joy in the room.
Right? There is a sense of freedom and joy. I think I spoke with one of my friends prior to the event about it, and she mentioned, she's like, oh, well, that'll be really interesting because it probably won't be very lively, like it is. Like, I think it'll be kind of quiet.
Yeah.
And so since you were there with me, yeah, it wasn't quiet. It was from the outside. I don't think you would have known that was an alcohol-free event.
Exactly.
It was just like a luxurious evening out. I think, when you talk about, yes, being a little more drawn to the alcohol-free lifestyle, and I really have to thank people like you, Terry, and others like Chris Marshall, like Jen Couch, like Annie Grace, that have paved the way for those of us coming a little bit later. I couldn't do it without that background support. But what I think about is the phrase, if you know, you know. Like, it's kind of cool over here, but I completely understand how you can't necessarily see that for years I believed that my life would be incomplete without alcohol.
Yes, yes. And you
Yeah.
are hitting so much there because again, we have this place of fear. And you are helping with this movement, with these zero proof experiences, to take away some of that stigma and say, come and see what an event or an evening or now a weekend can be like when you join in with women who are aligned with, actually, I like to think of it as like true wellness. Like wellness without wine is true wellness. Because anytime we're putting a carcinogen into our body, it's not really working toward wellness. So come and see what it's like to honor that inner part of knowing where you want to show up differently, where you want to experience life, but feel free from the hangovers and the anxiety and all of that. And so it's such a beautiful way to, if you are sober curious, to experience something that you might suspect but haven't really been a part of yet.
I like that, wellness without wine.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
a good tagline. I feel like our mission with zero proof experiences, we realize that socializing alcohol free can be awkward. In fact, let's be honest, just plain socializing sometimes can be awkward. So we are striving to create experiences that exude confidence and empowerment so that when you go back home, you, I've seen it in the post event groups. Like the ladies are ordering, some of the beverages that they experienced and others at the event, and they're taking it along and sharing that with their friends. Some are even like taking it to a restaurant, which is a really important part, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you've also done something kind of unique, and you've paired your events with an author who can share some of their wisdom around their own journey and their own, place that they had self-discovery and then have gone out in the world and, written their own sober living memoirs. And of course, at the event that I was at was Peggy Cooney, who also was a guest on the podcast back about a year ago. And so that was really fun. So I have all the cool people. Susie, you're in good company.
Peggy is amazing. We have just had so much fun getting to know each other over this year. And in fact, she has kind of taken on a larger role, and she is now the chief connection officer. Yeah, I think when you say I trust myself more, there is something there because I think I just keep stepping forward this whole year. And I'm not sure that would have happened.
Well, thanks for tuning in to another edition of the Sober Edge podcast. It's always my pleasure and honor to join you in this conversation. And one of the things that I have been working on recently that I wanted to share with you is my brand new guide, Stop Drinking in Your 50s and Beyond. You see, I was 55 when I decided to put down the drink and take up my new life. And I realized that the longer I do this alcohol free living and the more coaching I do, coming up on 4 years now, I realize that many of us are drinking for different reasons, depending upon how old we are. And so I've created a guide called Drinking Through the Decades. And in this guide, it talks about the differences, whether you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond, how we get tangled up in drinking and over drinking, and the number one lie we tell ourselves for each decade. And I really want to focus on inviting you into the opportunity to take a closer look at your drinking in your 50s, 60s, and beyond. I believe that the targeted approach is needed to hone in on those reasons we're drinking that look very different when we're in our 50s and 60s. So if you are at all interested, please grab my free guide. I can't wait to share this with you. I hope it helps you explore what's happening in your own brain and your own life, and what is the story you might be telling yourself. This guide also has a link to get on the waiting list for my brand new program that will be launching, Stop Drinking in Your 50s and Beyond, Self-Discovery. And I am very excited to open the doors in September of 2023. So I hope this recap episode has been inspiring for you. Again, spending 100 episodes on the podcast has been a labor of love, but mostly love. So thank you again for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.